If you were just charged with a DWI or DUI in New Jersey, you may be asking yourself, what's the difference? Does one mean less penalties or less jail time? Let me stop you right there. If you don't understand how this works in New Jersey, you're already falling behind, and the consequences are real. See, most people hit up Google or ask a buddy thinking, well, at least I didn't get DWI, it's just a DUI, right? Well, in New Jersey, there's absolutely a difference between DWI and DUI, driving while intoxicated, driving under the influence, and the consequences and the proofs are significantly different. And if you're going into court thinking, this is no big deal, judge is gonna go easy on me, this is my first offense, nobody was hurt, you're gambling with your future, your job, and your license. Because in New Jersey, these charges move fast and they hit hard, and there's no do-overs if you don't get it right the first time. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to break down exactly what the difference is between DUI and DWI in New Jersey, what you're really up against, and how to take control of your case before the court does it for you. Hi, I'm Daniel M. Rosenberg. I'm a criminal defense attorney and I represent individuals charged with crimes and DUI in the state of New Jersey. The truth is that most people use DWI and DUI interchangeably, judges and prosecutors as well, but there's a significant difference in the proofs and the penalties. DWI relates to alcohol, driving while intoxicated. DUI relates to substances, and notice that I didn't say illegal substances. Driving under the influence can relate to driving under the influence of heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, ecstasy, or any other illicit substance. But it also relates to legal substances like lawfully prescribed cannabis, painkillers, or anxiety medications. Just because you have a prescription doesn't mean you're allowed to lawfully drive that vehicle, at least in the eyes of the law in New Jersey. So a lot of the people think there's not really a difference between the two, and they show up thinking, I'll just explain myself, I'll show them that I had a prescription. Look, I smoked weed 8 hours before I drove. I'm certainly not gonna get charged with anything. I'm not gonna get convicted. And that's how they get jammed up. Not only because there's a difference in the proofs, but also there's a significant difference in the consequences. So for example, if you're charged with DWI for an alcohol-related offense, there is a pathway where you will not lose your license, but you'll have an interlock device installed in your car. That's significant because you can still get to and from work. If it's a substance-related charge, a DUI, there is no interlock requirement, only license suspension, which means if you are convicted, you are losing your license, period, full stop. Now, while the substance you may have ingested is different, alcohol versus something else, it is enforced under the same statute. It's 39:4-50, and that statute is very strictly enforced. In fact, for over 50 years, the state of New Jersey prohibited plea negotiations in DWI, DUI cases. What that means is you could be charged with murder, you could plea bargain the case down to a lesser charge, but if you were charged with an alcohol or drug-related offense, there was no plea bargain. You either had to resolve your case by pointing out a flaw, or you had to go to trial, or you had to plead guilty, which I don't know why you would ever do that. So the prosecution and the penalties are significantly different. Let's start with alcohol. The way they prosecute you in New Jersey is you have to provide a breath sample. They also have you do field sobriety tests, which have been tested to determine whether or not you're under the influence of alcohol. If you provide that breath sample and you blow above a .08, you're gonna have a DUI conviction, but you're eligible for an interlock device. If you blow a level that's above a .15, now you're looking at a license loss of between 4 and 6 months, followed by the interlock device. Now let's shift gears and talk about what happens if you're accused of being under the influence of a substance, whether it's legal or illegal. The breath sample is not going to tell them anything because there's not going to be any alcohol in your system. In addition to the breath test, they're going to have you do field sobriety tests, which have never been tested or deemed scientifically reliable to determine whether or not you're under the influence of drugs. But they still use that test because they don't really have anything else to do. They're then going to bring in someone called a DRE, a drug recognition evaluator, which is absolute junk science. And by the way, as the law stands today, you do not have to participate in a DRE evaluation. You do not have to provide a blood sample or a urine sample, even though they're going to ask for it. And then when you go in front of a judge, the law enforcement officer is going to testify, based on my training and experience, I believe this person was under the influence, and candidly, that can be enough, which is really scary. And then if you get convicted, you are looking at a mandatory minimum 7-month loss of license. And this is why, whether it's you or someone you know has been charged with a DWI or DUI, you absolutely need a criminal defense attorney. It is our job to defend you to the best of our ability and rip the state's case apart. All of these factors are significant and may mean the difference between a DUI, DWI conviction and a dismissal or a downgrade to a charge that you can live with. If they miss the step, we'll find it. If they rush the process, we'll expose it. Because the state can't cut corners when they're talking about your livelihood, your freedom, and lifelong consequences. And these are lifelong consequences because if you get a DUI conviction, while it is not a criminal charge in New Jersey, it will stay on your New Jersey driving abstract for the rest of your life.